I'm going to apologize up front if I butcher any of these names. Okay? But it should be pretty easy, right? It's the 2020 draft, so let's discuss it just a little bit as it warms up outside, finally. Which means that for those in the prairies, it'll get warmer as well. When we get warmer weather, so do the prairies normally. More to a seasonal normal where we are. Hopefully, it's seasonal normal where everybody is across the prairies watching these videos. Now, there seems to be a difference of opinion after two, mostly. So, future considerations currently has Alexis Lafreniere at number one. He is supposed to be just as good as advertised. Number two, Quentin Byfield. After that, three is Tim Stützle. Stutzel's gained a lot of momentum as the year's gone along. Could be threatening Byfield for two. Lucas Raymond at four. Alexander Holtz at five. Jamie Drysdale, the first defenseman to show up, at six. Marco Rossi at seven. Anton Lundell at eight. Yaroslav Askarov at nine. I talked about him in a profile video earlier. And Cole Perfetti at 10. Now, one thing to look for when it comes to the draft, centers. If a guy can play center, he may very well bump somebody down who can't. For instance, Marco Rossi could technically bump down Holtz on that list. Now, when we get into the other lists, in some cases, these players are all mixed up. But again, hockeyprospect.com just released their new standings. They have Alexis Lafreniere at 1, Quentin Byfield at 2, Tim Stützle at 3. That's pretty standard across those first two. Cole Perfetti at 4, and Yaroslav Askarov dropped to 5. So he was 3 in their last rankings, drops to 5. A little bit of a drop, but honestly, the excitement around this kid, this goaltender, it's there. And I know there are people going, it's a goalie, it's not going to happen. And I saw that comment a lot on that other video. Somebody's going to take a shot at drafting a goalie. Lucas Raymond, Jamie Drysdale, Marco Rossi, Alexander Holtz, and the only one that's new in this list is Noel Gunler, who's a right winger. So, hockeyprospect.com, almost the same 10 as future considerations. The only one that drops out for them is Lundell. So, pretty darn close. Elite Prospects, this is from November, so this may very well be a little bit different than what we'll see on their next ranking, because, of course, we've had the World Juniors in between. Alexis Lafreniere, number 1. Quentin Byfield, number 2. Lucas Raymond at 3. Jamie Drysdale at 4. So they've got him the highest on the list of anybody thus far this season. Anton Lundell at 5. Cole Perfetti at 6. Tim Stützle at 7. He's one of those ones that the next time their rankings come out could be much higher. Marco Rossi at 8. Alexander Holtz at 9. And Yaroslav Askarov does crack their top 10 at number 10. So again, I don't need to put the positions because they almost match in terms of who's in the list. It's just a matter of order, draft order. Now, Craig Button, he updates his lists regularly. He has Lafreniere at 1. So we can all agree this is the Alexis Lafreniere draft. Nobody's threatening him right now. There was talk of maybe Byfield. That's gone. Not only that, but Craig Button goes out on a limb and says Tim Stützle could be number 2. This is where it gets interesting. Stützle's left wing / center. So not a complete center. And Quentin Byfield is listed as a center. So it's possible that we may see some movement in 2 and 3 between now and June. And then in June, somebody comes up to the podium at 2 and they go, we're going to take Byfield because he's a pure center. So he has Byfield at 3, Cole Perfetti at 4. Perfetti, center and left wing as well. Marco Rossi, listed as a center. Jamie Drysdale, the defenseman. So he is the class of the defenseman right now. So if a team's looking for a defenseman, he'll be the first one off the board. And then where it gets interesting is, so he's got Askarov at 7, and he says, despite, and this is after the World Juniors saying, despite his appearance at the World Juniors not being great, he is still the best goaltender I've seen in the draft since Carey Price. So we've got Hockey Prospect comparing him to Vasilevsky, and you've got Craig Button comparing him to Carey Price. This is high praise indeed. So when people say, it's fine, there's all kinds of goalies. It's fine. It's all kinds of them. Right. And then there's elite level goaltenders. And Carey Price at the time he was drafted was an elite level goaltender, has had some elite seasons. And Vasilevsky, Vezina Trophy and all that. So, yeah, these are pretty good goaltenders to be compared to. Lucas Raymond, he has at 8, which is the lowest anybody's had him on. Hendrix Lapierre, he has at 9. That's a center. And Connor Zary, he has as a center at number 10. Craig Button's lists normally are a little bit different. And he sometimes has a guy listed higher than anybody else who ends up being interesting. That at the draft table, somebody goes, you know what? We like this guy too. This guy Craig's talked about all year, we like him too. So when Craig's list is different from the others, and his list is available on tsn.com, when it's different from the others, keep track of the guys that he's talking about, because sometimes the guys he's talking about during the year turn out to be pretty darn good prospects. Now, where it also gets interesting is when you look at the 2020 draft, and it is stated that the top 20 in this year's draft are all pretty darn exceptional players. There are defensemen sitting outside the top 10 between 11 and 20. At the draft table, I'm saying right now, there's going to be a team, let's just say Rossi. There's a team that loves Marco Rossi. He's still on the board. They want him. So Marco Rossi, he's a center. Trying to think somebody would want a center. Say the Islanders. Just as an example. The Islanders want a center. Just throwing that out there. So they go, all right, we'll offer up a first rounder and yada, yada, yada. And maybe the team that has that number 5 pick is like, we like Rossi. Yeah. But there's a defenseman that's going to be available at that slot that we like too. So I'm just throwing that out there as an example. And again, you know, things are going to change. But because this draft is so stacked, to me, I'm already thinking back to 2003 when we had a stacked first round that was fantastic. I think you have 2 misses in the entire first round in 2003. 2, maybe 3 misses in the first round of 2003. I know it wasn't many. And the way that they're talking about this draft class, it sounds similar. Now, that's really solid talent. I don't know how many of these players become stars, but it's about really, really solid talent. And not to say anything negative about the last few draft classes, but this one it does feel like there's more excitement towards. And Lafreniere is definitely a big part of the reason why. But I don't think that if you lose at the draft lottery and you get a number 4 or number 5 spot, I don't think that's as much of a downer this year as it might be in other years. Yeah, you miss out on Lafreniere and Byfield and likely Stutzel as your top 3. But whoever you get at 4 or 5 is still going to be a very good player. And then the question mark that I have in my head is how many of these guys are going to be able to make that jump in their first year. If this is truly an exceptional class, we may see more than usual making that jump. Now, out of this year's draft, we saw, 4 or 5 of them make their team out of camp, and we still see Kakko and Hughes playing, and we can debate whether that's for the better or for the worst. So you have to think that in a draft where so many are seen as exceptional, we may see 6, 10 ready right out of the draft. And that's where, for people who say, well, they're not going to draft a goalie early, that's where Askarov's placement may very well be affected. Goaltenders aren't normally drafted with the idea that, okay, this goaltender is going to be ready to go right now. So some team, again, that's drafting at 7th or 8th, if Askarov's dropped down to 7th or 8th, might get a phone call from a team that needs a goaltender, made the playoffs, doesn't have a top 10 draft pick. They make that phone call to, say, at number 8. Let's say it's the Ducks that are drafting at 8. And it's, all right, well, we don't really need a goaltender. We got John Gibson for the foreseeable future. All right, we'll talk. I do think this is a draft where we may see a lot of movement in the first round. Once that draft lottery's come and gone, and I'm wearing Detroit for no given reason, really. There's no reason to wear Detroit today for a draft video, right? This may very well be where a team like Detroit makes out very, very well for themselves. If they win the draft lottery, they get Alexis Lafreniere. If they draft 4th, there may be some trading done by Steve Yzerman if there isn't somebody at 4 that he says, this is exactly what I want. Maybe he trades down and gets 2 draft picks. Maybe Ottawa with 2 first-round picks Maybe they take those 2 first-round picks and try to move up. Maybe they take those 2 first-round picks, move one of them to try to get another extra. This is that draft. And we may, again, like I said, we may very well see general managers sitting down and not wanting to trade out, but being willing to trade down a little bit, because in a deep draft like this, a second or third round draft pick may very well be a very good player and may very well be worth what a late first rounder normally would be worth. I don't know how many first round picks are going to get moved by the deadline, but I don't think any teams that are bubble teams are going to be wanting to move their first round pick because of how good this draft looks. So, yeah, consider this me just kind of dipping my foot in with that first video where I talked about Askarov, and now just talking about just the top 10. Just getting into the top 10 and just showing what the projections are right now. And we'll see how this evolves between now and June. It's not going to look like this in June. It never does. And in a draft like this one, where there's so many potentially premier talents, there's, I think, more room for movement. And it means that if you see, let's just say Lucas Raymond, just throw him out there. So he drops from, say, 6th to 12th. I don't think in this year's draft, with how excellent this year's draft is, I don't think it's going to be seen as he dropped. He's not going to be what we thought he would be. I think it's going to be a matter of, you know what, there are so many good talents in this draft. You draft him at 12, that's fine. You get him at 6, that's good too. And again, on some level, I think it's going to be teams saying, this is what we want, this is what we need, this is the player we covet. We're going to go out and get this guy. And yeah, we may see a lot of trades. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I think this year's draft lottery, which again, you know, I live stream draft lottery, I live stream the draft as well, that first round that day. I think it's going to be very entertaining. I think it's going to be some very interesting stuff that happens between now and June. The draft lottery, I think once that's taken place, once that's set in stone as to who's drafting where in the first round, I think we may see some movement maybe before the draft. And definitely at the draft table, I think we'll see some moves. Do you guys agree? Do you guys think this is going to be a year where there's some tremendous movement and we're going to see some guys getting drafted in the 15 to 20 range who are ready right out of the gate and may very well be really solid players? I'm thinking of Anaheim in 2003 when they did pretty well at the draft table, and others as well. There were a lot of really good draft picks in 2003. Might be the best draft class outside of 79. But I've mentioned this before. The 1979 draft class was different because that was the year that they dropped the draft age down to 18. And so you had 2 years worth wrapped up in one. You had 2 years worth of prospects wrapped up in one. Guys who would have been drafted number 3 or number 4. You know, they get drafted at 7 or 8. And it was a pretty stacked class. This year's class looks pretty good too. Let me know who you guys are excited about, who you think is going to be the steal of the draft, and let me know why in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Like I said, this is just sort of me dipping my toe in and saying, all right, what are the lists right now? And then we'll take a look at some of these prospects in prospect videos between now and the draft. As long as you guys want to see it, it'll be there. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.